Nurse Maya Torres had sworn an oath to save lives, placing her in direct conflict with the chief of medicine's chilling command to step back and let him die. Even as the blood of the city's most feared crime lord soaked the gleaming hospital floor, Maya's audacious decision to intervene would ignite a savage gang war and transform her destiny forever. The rain hammered down in torrents against the reinforced glass windows of St. Michael's General Hospital. It was 3:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, the dead hour of the overnight shift, when the world outside usually fell still. But in the trauma ward, silence was a luxury Maya Torres never expected. The automatic doors of the emergency bay burst from their hinges as 3 black Mercedes SUVs roared onto the ambulance ramp, completely disregarding emergency procedures. Before the security guards could even reach for their radios, a dozen men in expensive designer suits flooded the entrance. They weren't panicked family members. They moved like a tactical squad, their coats falling open to reveal the unmistakable steel of shoulder-holstered weapons. "We need a doctor, now," a voice thundered. The man who bellowed it was Marco Reyes, a notorious enforcer for the city's most dangerous syndicate. Suspended between the arms of 2 hulking guards was Dominic Vega, even half-conscious, coughing up blood onto his ruined white dress shirt. Dominic radiated an aura of terrifying power. He was 34, the undisputed head of the Vega family, a man who commanded the city's underground ports, construction unions, and illicit gambling dens. He was ruthless, calculated, and currently bleeding to death from 3 high-caliber bullet wounds to his chest and abdomen. Maya didn't hesitate. "Get him on a gurney. Trauma Bay 2. Move," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. She didn't care about the weapons or the $1,000 suits. She saw a critical patient. They hauled Dominic onto the stretcher. Maya immediately began assessing the damage, pressing sterile dressings hard against his right side, where the blood flow was the heaviest. His skin was dangerously pale, drenched in a sheen of cold sweat. Tachycardic, pulses thready. "He's hypotensive. We need O-negative blood. Start 2 large-bore IVs and get the crash cart ready." Maya barked at the junior nurses who were paralyzed with fear. "Don't just stand there. Move." He studied Dominic Vega, then the mobsters, his face an unreadable mask. "Dr. Whitmore, he has a perforated lung and possible arterial bleeding in his abdomen. He needs to go to an OR immediately." Maya pleaded, attempting to step back toward the patient. "I said step away." Whitmore snapped. He turned to Marco Reyes. "Gentlemen, St. Michael's is not equipped to handle a situation of this magnitude safely. We are instituting a lockdown. I have already arranged a specialized secure transport. They will take Mr. Vega to a private surgical facility run by our affiliates." Marco's eyes narrowed, his hand drifting toward his jacket. "He doesn't have time for a detour, document. You fix him here or I redecorate this lobby with your skull." Whitmore didn't flinch. "If you shoot me, there is no surgeon left to operate. The transport is 7 minutes away. We will stabilize him here with pressure dressings until they arrive. That is my final clinical decision." Maya stared at Whitmore in absolute disbelief. 7 minutes? Dominic wouldn't last 4. As a seasoned trauma nurse, she understood exactly what Whitmore was doing. He wasn't stabilizing the patient. He was stalling. He was doing just enough to appear compliant while practically guaranteeing the patient would bleed out on the table. Then the realization struck her like a physical blow. The rumors of Whitmore's crushing gambling debts, the whispers that Anton, the Cobra Santino, Dominic Vega's most dangerous rival, had been purchasing politicians and city officials. Whitmore was on Santino's payroll. The secure transport wasn't an ambulance. It was a cleanup crew sent to finish the job. Maya looked down at Dominic. His dark eyes flickered open for a split second, locking onto hers. In that gaze, there was no fear, only a fierce, defiant rage against the fading of the light. He seized her wrist, his grip astonishingly powerful for a dying man, smearing his blood across her pale skin. "Don't let them," he rasped, the words barely a whisper, bubbling with blood. Dr. Whitmore stepped forward, roughly prying Dominic's fingers from Maya. "Nurse Torres, take the rest of the staff and wait in the break room. I will monitor his vitals until the transport arrives. He will die, Dr. Whitmore. You are killing him," Maya said, her voice trembling with a mixture of terror and fury. "You are dangerously close to losing your license, Maya. I am your superior. Get out, now." The hospital security, men who reported directly to Whitmore, moved in, nervously flanking the Vega enforcers. Marco Reyes looked torn, unaware of the medical reality, caught between pressing a gun to a doctor's head and trusting the men to keep his boss alive until this supposed transport arrived. Maya backed away, her hands covered in Dominic's blood. She walked out of Trauma Bay 2, the heavy doors sliding shut behind her, sealing the crime boss inside with his executioner. The clock on the wall read 3:55 a.m. Maya paced the sterile hallway just out of sight of Trauma Bay 2. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a caged animal. She could hear the rain pounding against the building, a relentless drumbeat matching her dread. She stared at her blood-soaked hands. The sharp metallic scent of copper filled her nostrils. She shut her eyes, recalling the oath she had taken when she received her nursing pin. "I will do all in my power to maintain and elevate the standard of my profession. I will devote myself to the welfare of those committed to my care." There were no exceptions in that oath for criminals. There were no clauses that permitted her to look the other way when a corrupt doctor orchestrated a murder through medical neglect. She made her choice. If she let Dominic Vega die, she would be no different from the men who shot him. Maya sprinted toward the resident lounge. She burst through the door, startling Dr. Ethan Brooks, a brilliant but persistently anxious first-year surgical resident who was frantically studying flashcards. "Ethan, I need you. Now. Grab a mobile surgical kit, the heavy clamp set, and meet me at the service elevator in exactly 90 seconds. Maya demanded, her tone leaving zero room for debate. "Maya. What? Why? I'm not supposed to. A man is bleeding to death on our floor because Whitmore is stalling. If you ever wanted to be a real doctor, Ethan, tonight is your night." 90 seconds. Maya dashed back to the supply closet near the trauma bays. She seized 6 units of O-negative blood, shoving them into a cooler. Next, she moved to the electrical panel for the emergency ward. With a silent prayer, she threw the breaker switch for the lights in the main corridor. Darkness instantly swallowed the hallway, followed a heartbeat later by the dim red glow of the emergency backup lighting. Shouts of confusion erupted from the Vega enforcers and hospital security. Using the chaos, Maya slipped through the side connecting door into Trauma Bay 2. Whitmore was standing over Dominic, doing absolutely nothing, checking his gold watch. He turned, startled by the power outage. Before he could react, Maya grabbed a heavy metal oxygen tank wrench and brought it down hard on the back of Whitmore's knee. The doctor let out a pitiful yelp and collapsed to the floor. "You insane woman!" Whitmore hissed, clutching his leg. "You're finished. You hear me? Finished." Maya ignored him. She released the brake on the gurney's wheels and shoved it toward the rear exit of the bay, the doors that opened to the old decommissioned north wing of the hospital. "Hey! What's happening in there?" Marco Reyes's voice boomed from the other side of the main doors. "I'm saving his life. Hold the door." Maya shouted back, driving the heavy gurney with every ounce of her strength. She navigated the darkened corridors of the abandoned wing, the squealing of the gurney wheels echoing like gunshots in the silence. She reached operating room 3, a room stripped of modern equipment, but still fitted with an old surgical table and basic overhead lights wired to the backup generator. Ethan was waiting there, trembling, gripping a sterile tray of surgical instruments. When he saw who was on the gurney, the color drained from his face. "Maya, that's Dominic Vega. If he dies on this table, his men will tear us apart. If he lives, the police, stop talking and scrub in, Dr. Brooks." Maya ordered, lifting Dominic onto the surgical table with a massive effort. "We don't have an anesthesiologist. I'm going to push a heavy dose of ketamine and morphine. You need to open him up, find that arterial bleeder, and clamp it. I will manage his vitals and fluids." Dominic's breathing was shallow, a terrifying rattle filling his chest. Maya swiftly established the 4 lines, squeezing the bags of O-negative blood to force them into his depleted system faster. Ethan took a steadying breath, his hands trembling violently as he lifted the scalpel. He looked at Maya. She nodded, her eyes fierce and unyielding. "Cutting now," Ethan whispered. For the next 50 minutes, Operating Room 3 became a battleground. It was a brutal, desperate, ugly fight against death. Blood soaked through Ethan's scrubs and stained Maya's forearms crimson. The monitors, connected to a portable battery, screamed a relentless, high-pitched warning of Dominic's failing heart. Pressure is dropping. 55/40. Maya shouted over the frantic beeping. He's crashing. Where is it, Ethan? I can't see. There's too much blood. Ethan panicked, desperately working the suction. Maya didn't think. She acted. She plunged her bare hands into the surgical cavity, her fingers navigating the slick, warm terrain of Dominic's internal organs, searching by pure instinct and anatomical memory. Her fingers grazed against a pulsing tear. Here. I've got my finger on the hepatic artery. Clamp it right above my hand. She called out. Ethan slammed the surgical clamp down. Instantly, the surging pool of blood slowed to a halt. Maya watched the monitor. 62/45. 72/52. 88/62. The rhythm of his heart steadied. He wasn't out of danger, but he was no longer actively dying. Ethan staggered back, collapsing against the tiled wall, sliding down to the floor as he gasped for breath. Maya exhaled a shaky breath, beginning the painstaking process of suturing the surrounding tissue. Suddenly, the heavy metal doors of the operating room were violently kicked open. 4 men stormed in, assault rifles raised. Leading them was a man Maya didn't recognize. A man with cold, reptilian eyes and a tailored gray suit. It wasn't Marco Reyes. Well, the man purred, surveying Dominic's unconscious body. Dr. Whitmore told me he had a rogue nurse on his hands. It appears the rat was telling the truth. Maya recognized the description from the whispers in the break room. This was Anton the Cobra Santino. Whitmore's secure transport had arrived and they hadn't come to take Dominic to a hospital. They had come to finish the assassination. Santino raised a silenced pistol, aiming it squarely at Maya's forehead. You did a remarkable job patching him up, sweetheart. But it's time for you and Dr. Frankenstein down there to clock out permanently. Before Santino could pull the trigger, a thunderous explosion echoed from the hallway. Gunfire erupted, loud, unsilenced, and deafeningly close. Marco Reyes and the Vega enforcers crashed through the adjoining scrub room windows, raining glass and lead into the operating theater. Santino's men returned fire. Maya threw herself over Dominic's body, using herself as a human shield as bullets tore through the ancient medical equipment, shattering monitors and ripping plaster from the walls. The firefight lasted only 12 seconds, but to Maya it felt like a lifetime. When the smoke cleared, Santino's men lay dead on the floor. Santino himself was bleeding from a gunshot wound to the shoulder, pinned to the wall by Marco Reyes, who held a combat knife to the rival boss's throat. Marco looked past his bleeding enemy, his eyes locking onto Maya, who was still draped protectively over his boss's surgical table. He saw the clamped artery, the emptied blood bags, and the steady rise and fall of Dominic's chest. You saved him, Marco said, his rough voice tinged with a stunned reverence. Beneath Maya, Dominic Vega stirred. The heavy sedatives were wearing off. His dark, dangerous eyes fluttered open. He looked past the dead bodies, past the smoke, and stared directly up into Maya's pale, terrified face. He slowly lifted a heavy, blood-stained hand, his knuckles grazing against her cheek. I owe you my life, nurse. Dominic murmured, his voice dark and gravelly. And a Vega never forgets a debt. Maya stood motionless as the syndicate men began to carefully unhook Dominic from the monitors, preparing to move him to a genuinely secure location. She had saved a life, but as she watched the most dangerous men in Houston being carried away, looking back at her with a predatory intensity, Maya realized she had just surrendered her quiet, ordinary life for something infinitely more terrifying. The fallout was immediate, brutal, and entirely unglamorous. By 9 a.m. the next morning, Maya Torres was standing in the Human Resources office of St. Michael's General Hospital, flanked by 2 armed security guards. Dr. Gerald Whitmore sat behind a mahogany desk, his knee heavily braced from where Maya had struck him. He didn't look like a man who had nearly orchestrated a murder. He looked like a self-righteous bureaucrat. Gross insubordination, assault on a superior, aiding and abetting a known fugitive. Whitmore recited, sliding a termination notice across the desk. I have already contacted the Texas Board of Nursing. Your license is suspended pending a full criminal investigation. The authorities will be contacting you shortly, Ms. Torres. You are finished in Houston. Maya didn't sign the notice. She turned and walked out, her chest tight with a suffocating blend of rage and grief. She had done the right thing. She had honored her oath. And it had cost her everything. Dr. Ethan Brooks, the resident who had assisted her, had already been quietly reassigned to a rural clinic upstate, effectively ending his career. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as men like Whitmore designed it to. For 4 weeks, Maya hid in her cramped second-floor apartment in Midtown Heights. She drained her savings, paying for a lawyer who seemed more frightened of the hospital's legal team than committed to defending her. She applied for waitressing positions, but every time an employer ran a background check and saw the pending felony investigation, the doors slammed shut. The true terror, however, wasn't the poverty. It was the paranoia. Black SUVs with tinted windows began idling across the street on Camden Avenue. She received silent phone calls at 4 a.m. Anton the Cobra Santino had survived the shootout at the hospital, and in the criminal underworld, leaving a witness alive was a fatal error. Maya knew it was only a matter of time before Santino's men came to finish what they started. On a suffocatingly humid Wednesday evening, the inevitable happened. Maya was boiling water for cheap pasta when the deadbolt on her front door gave a sickening crack. Before she could even reach for the kitchen knife, the door was kicked off its hinges. 2 men stepped into her living room. They didn't wear masks. They didn't need to. Make a sound, and I'll put a bullet through your spine before you hit the floor. The taller man snarled, raising a suppressed pistol. Maya froze, her medical mind hyper-focusing on the weapon. A 9mm, close range, massive tissue damage, unsurvivable. Suddenly, the window leading to her fire escape shattered inward. A shadow detached itself from the darkness. It was Marco Reyes. He moved with terrifying, practiced precision. He didn't shout. He just acted. He drove a combat knife into the gun-wielding hitman's shoulder, pinning him to the drywall, while simultaneously sweeping the legs out from the second man. A sickening crunch echoed through the apartment as the second man's head struck the cast iron radiator. In less than 8 seconds, the threat was neutralized. Pack a bag, ma'am. You have 4 minutes. Marco said, breathing steadily as he wiped his blade on the unconscious man's jacket. I'm not going anywhere with you. Maya stammered, retreating toward the wall. You brought this into my life. Marco leveled a hard, uncompromising gaze at her. Santino sent these men because Whitmore tipped him off that you're about to be subpoenaed by the district attorney. Whitmore wants you silenced so you can't testify about his delay tactics in the ER. You stay here, you die. You come with me, you live. 4 minutes. Maya grabbed a duffel bag, throwing in clothes, her passport, and her worn medical textbook. 40 minutes later, the armored Mercedes turned off the main highway and rolled through a heavily guarded wrought iron gate on Lakewood Drive in Riverside Hills. The estate was immense, a sprawling limestone manor concealed behind centuries-old oak trees. Marco led her through the grand foyer, past men armed with submachine guns, and down into a converted sub-basement. Maya stopped dead in her tracks. It wasn't a dungeon. It was a state-of-the-art intensive care unit. The monitors, the ventilators, the sterile lighting. It was better equipped than St. Michael's. Propped up in a mechanical hospital bed, surrounded by financial ledgers and multiple encrypted laptops, was Dominic Vega. The color had returned to his face, though he moved with the guarded, careful posture of a man nursing a freshly sutured abdomen. He looked up, his dark eyes locking onto hers with that same predatory intensity she remembered from the operating room. "Welcome to my home, Maya," Dominic said, his voice smooth and commanding. "You destroyed my life." Maya fired back, the fear suddenly dissolving into exhaustion and rage. "I saved you, and in return I lost my job, my license, and now I'm being hunted by assassins in my own kitchen." Dominic didn't flinch. He closed his laptop. "Whitmore destroyed your life. Santino is trying to end it. I am the only reason you are currently breathing." He gestured to a chair beside his bed. "Sit." Reluctantly, Maya sat. I told you a Vega never forgets a debt. Dominic continued, leaning forward, wincing slightly as his stitches pulled. I am going to restore your life. But to do that, I need to completely dismantle Anton Santino and Gerald Whitmore. And I need your knowledge to do it. I'm a nurse, not a criminal. Maya said firmly, crossing her arms. I don't kill people. I have enough men who handle that, Dominic replied, a dark smirk playing on his lips. I need your mind. When my men hacked Whitmore's financials, we found a gap. He's laundering millions for Santino. But the money vanishes before it reaches the offshore accounts. There has to be a physical ledger. A paper trail. Whitmore is too old-fashioned to trust the cloud. Maya's mind raced back through her years walking the halls of St. Michael's. She remembered the decommissioned North Wing. The very place she had dragged Dominic to save his life. She remembered Dr. Whitmore's strict, peculiar rule that no janitorial staff was permitted in the old administrative records room on the 3rd floor. The North Wing, Maya whispered. Room 308. It's supposed to be condemned, but the lock is a high-security biometric scanner. It makes no sense for an empty room. Dominic's eyes lit with dangerous satisfaction. Marco. On it, boss. Marco grunted from the doorway. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in organized, bloodless warfare. Dominic didn't send hitmen to the hospital. Instead, he used Maya's intelligence to deploy an elite ghost team into the North Wing. They bypassed the lock, extracted the physical ledgers, and vanished before the morning shift arrived. The ledgers contained exactly what Dominic had suspected. Detailed records of Whitmore funneling Santino's drug money through St. Michael's Children's Medical Foundation, skimming 25% to settle his own gambling debts. But Dominic understood that simply eliminating Whitmore wouldn't clear Maya's name. It had to be done legally. And it had to be a spectacle. On a Monday morning, an anonymous, heavily encrypted data package was sent simultaneously to the FBI's Organized Crime Division, the IRS, and the lead investigative journalist at the Houston Chronicle. By noon, the hospital was swarming with federal agents. Dr. Gerald Whitmore was arrested in the middle of a press conference, handcuffed and dragged out in front of the flashing cameras of the local news. The charges were staggering. Money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit murder. To spare himself, the cowardly doctor immediately turned on Anton Santino, surrendering decades of the Cobra's secrets in exchange for a plea deal in a white-collar prison. Santino, realizing his empire was crumbling, attempted to flee the country. He booked a private charter out of Bush Intercontinental Airport. But Dominic was always 3 steps ahead. When Santino stepped onto the tarmac, he wasn't greeted by his pilots. He was greeted by Marco Reyes and a dozen heavily armed federal marshals, tipped off anonymously by the Vega Syndicate. Santino was taken into custody without a single shot fired, effectively ending the gang war and cementing Dominic's absolute command over the city. 6 weeks later, the dust had settled. With Whitmore's corruption fully exposed, the Texas Board of Nursing issued a formal public apology to Maya Torres. Her medical license was fully reinstated. Her record wiped clean of the fabricated felony charges. The new hospital administration offered her the position of head of trauma, complete with a substantial salary increase. Maya turned it down. Instead, she stood in the center of a newly renovated sprawling warehouse in the Harbor District. The space was filled with millions of dollars worth of cutting-edge medical equipment, pristine surgical bays, and a fully stocked pharmacy. The heavy metal doors rolled open and Dominic Vega walked in. He moved fluidly now, the gunshot wounds fully healed. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, looking less like a street thug and more like the king of the city. The CT scanner arrives tomorrow, Dominic noted, looking around the immaculate clinic. Are you certain this is what you want, Maya? You could have had the penthouse corner office at St. Michael's. Maya looked at him, a soft, confident smile touching her lips. The system at St. Michael's only serves the people who can afford it. This clinic, this is for the people who slip through the cracks. The undocumented, the desperate, the people who show up at 4 a.m. with nowhere else to go. And the occasional crime boss bleeding out. Dominic asked, stepping closer. The air between them hummed with that undeniable, dangerous electricity that had ignited on the night they met. Only if he promises not to bleed on my new floors, Maya replied, not retreating as he closed the distance between them. Dominic reached out, gently tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was remarkably tender for a man with so much blood on his hands. You saved my life, Maya. I built this clinic for you. But I won't pretend I don't want more. I am a dangerous man to stand beside. Maya looked into his dark eyes, no longer afraid of the shadows that surrounded him. She had stood up to corrupt doctors, survived hitmen, and stitched up a kingpin on a rusted table. She knew exactly who he was, and she knew exactly who she was. I'm a trauma nurse, Dominic. Maya whispered, stepping into his embrace. I specialize in dangerous situations. If you were captivated by Maya's courage and Dominic's fierce loyalty, hit that like button right now. This story proves that doing the right thing, even when it's terrifying, can change your destiny. Share this video with someone who loves a dark, dramatic romance with intense twists. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next thrilling, real-life inspired drama. What would you have done in Maya's shoes? Drop a comment below.